Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about the ongoing impact of the war in Iran on the global economy, and specifically what's now happening with diesel prices around the world, because this situation is starting to get extremely serious. Oil has been above $100 per barrel for the past 10 days. Fuel prices are rising sharply across multiple countries, and in the United States, diesel has just gone above $5 per gallon. Now, that might not sound like a big number or anything to get too excited about, but this is only the second time in history that diesel has ever crossed that level. The first time was in 2022 during the global energy crisis triggered by the war in Ukraine, and now it's happening again. So in this video, I'm going to explain exactly what's going on, why fuel prices are rising everywhere, even in countries that don't rely on Middle Eastern oil, and why this isn't now just about fuel. Because this is now the start of an impact on food, industry, healthcare, and in fact, virtually every single part of the global economy. We are continuing to see an escalation in the conflict in the Middle East. Drone attacks are continuing on energy infrastructure, and the most recently reported strike hit a natural gas field in the United Arab Emirates, which has led to the operations being suspended. At the same time, there have been continued attacks impacting the port of Fujairah, one of the most important oil export hubs in the world. And tensions around the Strait of Hormuz remain extremely high, because 20% of global oil flows through that route every single day. Well, it used to, but it isn't at the moment because it's essentially closed. And as a result of all of this, Brent crude has now been above $100 per barrel for the last 10 days on average. This is the highest level that we've seen consistently since 2022, since the start of the war in Ukraine. So this is no longer a short-term spike. This is now starting to look like a sustained global energy shock. And this is now feeding directly into fuel prices. In the United States, diesel has now gone above $5 per gallon, as I just mentioned. And this has only happened once before in history. Now, that tells us that this is a significant moment, that this is a big problem. So what we're seeing is a return to crisis level pricing. And when diesel prices surge, it doesn't just affect people who drive diesel vehicles. It affects the entire economy. If we look at gasoline prices in the US, they're currently sitting at around $3.70 per gallon, depending on where you live, which is the highest level since 2023. So we're already seeing gasoline following diesel. And this isn't just happening in the United States. We're seeing diesel prices rise everywhere around the world. In the UK, prices are now around £1.60 per litre, which is back towards where we saw at the start of 2022. In Canada, diesel's sitting at almost $2 to Canadian dollars per litre, again approaching levels that haven't been seen since that global energy shock following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And in Australia, diesel's now trading around $2.50, moving back towards those highs. So this is clearly a global diesel price shock, not just confined to the USA. And the key point here is that this is happening in multiple major economies at the same time. And that's going to have a big impact on the global economy. This isn't isolated, this is synchronized. It means businesses, transport networks, and supply chains in all countries being affected are hit simultaneously. And I've highlighted the USA, UK, Canada, and Australia because I know a lot of people watching are based in those regions. But wherever you are in the world, I'm sure that you are currently seeing increased prices at the pumps. Every country that relies on diesel, which is effectively every modern economy, is now feeling the impact. Lots of trucks and commercial vehicles use diesel. Because diesel sits at the heart of transportation, logistics, agriculture, and industry, this becomes a global cost shock, not just confined to fuel. So what starts as an oil price issue very quickly turns into higher prices everywhere, pressure on businesses, and a squeeze on consumers on a global scale. And here's the key point. This is how energy shocks turn into economic crises. Now you might be thinking, why is this affecting countries like the United States? The USA doesn't import much oil from the Middle East, so why are prices rising at the pumps in the US? Well, the answer is simple. Oil is a global commodity. There's effectively one global price. So when oil prices rise in the Middle East, they rise for everyone. Even if oil is produced domestically, producers will still sell it at the prevailing global market price because they always have an option to export it. If they don't sell it in the home market, they can sell it elsewhere. So consumers end up paying elevated prices even if oil never leaves their country. So oil produced in the USA is being sold at market prices, not at USA friendly prices. And this is why disruption in the Middle East immediately feeds through into global gasoline and diesel prices. Now, this is where things become more serious. Diesel is the backbone of the global economy. It powers supply chains, freight transport, farming, manufacturing, and construction. So when diesel prices rise sharply, it pushes up the cost of food, goods, infrastructure, and industrial production. This is how an oil shock turns into a full economic shock. And it goes even further than that. Hospitals rely upon diesel backup generators. Pharmaceuticals rely on refrigerated transport and global logistics. And farming depends on diesel-powered machinery and fertilizer production. So rising diesel prices can lead to shortages, delays, and rising costs across essential services. Now, there's also an interesting geopolitical angle emerging. Donald Trump has said that the attacks across the region by Iran were unexpected and caught people off guard, suggesting that the situation escalated beyond what had been anticipated. However, there is speculation in the media that this risk had been raised with Donald Trump in advance. And when you look at this from a strategic perspective, this outcome actually looks entirely logical. If you consider what we've seen in the war in Ukraine, Ukraine has deliberately targeted Russia's oil, gas, and export infrastructure to weaken its economy. So, applying that same logic here, how does Iran apply pressure economically on the USA? Well, it does that by disrupting oil supplies, targeting infrastructure, and creating a global price shock, which is exactly what we are now seeing. So it seems highly unlikely that this scenario was not at least considered by some of the military brains. If you're a professional general, if that's what you do, and you're thinking about what could be the reaction of bombing Iran, surely you would cover all of the bases. But Donald Trump is saying that that was never discussed, it was never considered, nobody expected anything like this to happen. So the overall summary of today's video is that oil has now been trading for over $100 per barrel for around the last 10 days. Diesel prices have crossed $5 per gallon in the USA, only the second time that this has happened in history. Fuel prices are now rising rapidly across the entire world, and this is now feeding directly into inflation, supply chains, food production, healthcare, and in fact, virtually every single part of the global economy. And with no end in sight for this conflict, things could get significantly worse for the rest of 2026. So I'll keep you posted on any further news and developments as soon as they occur, but hopefully you found today's video useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking, thinking about what's going on in Iran, how it's going to impact on you and your life. If you've liked what I've said, or maybe you didn't like it, but you've been interested in it, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Don't forget, I'm currently running my competition where you can win my property or a cash alternative prize. Scan the QR code on the screen now or click the link in the description below if you want to get involved in that. There's some really exciting deals on the go at the moment. Thank you also to everyone that's supported me in other ways. If you bought me a coffee or sent me a YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, I really appreciate that support. Thank you so much. And here's something to put a smile on your face.